Hey guys, Jack's your Auto Mechanic. Today we're going to be putting a power steering gearbox on this 2000 Jeep Wrangler. I went with a brand new one from A Premium. I got a link down below in the description for you if you need one for yourself. Mine started leaking out of the bottom. They do sell a seal kit, but just for the bottom. Mine's leaking where the shaft goes in the top and from the bottom. You know, it's got 200,000 miles on it. If I just put a seal on it, everything else in there is still just as worn out and probably going to wear out that seal too. And in the past, I've tried replacing these with remanufactured parts. I'm not going to say names, but I haven't had very good luck with any of those that I've ever purchased over the last 30 years. And I've put in a lot of them. A lot of times you get them and they've got more slop in them than the one you just took out. They don't leak, but they got more play, and that's not what we're looking for. This one should be just a direct bolt on, and you shouldn't have to do anything. Just bolt it on, and you're good to go. So to do this job, you're going to need a couple special tools. You're going to need a pitman arm removal tool, and you're also going to need a 34mm socket. Now, if you don't have one, I got links down below for that. You're also going to need plenty of power steering fluid, drain pan, creeper, a couple other sockets or wrenches like a 18mm, 13mm. But let me walk you through it. Go ahead and raise your hood. Really the only reason to have your hood up is so that we can remove our power steering cap. We'll remove the cap and set it off to the side. This is going to allow for our fluid to drain completely once we take our hoses off from the gearbox down below. You want to get underneath your vehicle, find your gearbox. It's right underneath the front bumper. It's real easy to get to. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this 34mm nut. I'm going to use my socket and a breaker bar. If you've got other means, that's great. Now we'll need our pitman arm removal tool. Slide it over and see there's a little nub right here, and we're going to want that to line up on the very bottom, and it will help center it. There's like a hole drilled through the center of this, so that nub being in the center won't allow it to move. Then you're just going to tighten that up. This ratchet's not going to last very long. And we'll move back to the breaker bar. Now, mine is coming right loose because I've had it loose before. I want to point out a quick tip. Tighten this up. If it feels like it just won't go anymore, that's good. You can stop and then go ahead and smack the bottom of this with a hammer. Just smack the crap out of it if you need to, and it should pop that loose just a little bit, and then you can go back to putting more pressure on it and continue doing the same thing. Once you get it loose, you can see it'll just fall right down. Like I said, mine's been leaking, so this is all saturated. If yours isn't leaking, you can spray this with WD-40 before you do the job. Let it soak for an hour or so, and that should also help you to remove this. Crawl up underneath your vehicle, find your power steering gearbox. You can see mine's completely saturated. Right here, there's a bolt, so we'll need to turn our steering wheel. This is the bottom side. There's a nut on the top. So we'll rotate that shaft to give us access to that 13mm head bolt. Once you get the shaft rotated around, it'll give you access to the 13mm head bolt that's on the steering shaft. You want to go ahead and completely remove that bolt. So I put a floor jack underneath the power steering gearbox with a couple of blocks just to help support the weight. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove the 3 mounting bolts. They're 5/8. Now the bolts are completely removed, we can go ahead and start letting our jack down. Keep in mind that we still have our power steering lines attached. You can see, having lowered it down, we've got real good access to our pressure lines, which are 18mm. So if you can get at them with your wrench, no problem, use them. Another suggestion is to use a crow's foot. Let's put this on the end of your ratchet, get it in there. Can help you get a little better access or better angle. Go ahead and crack your lines loose. You don't have to remove them at this point, just get them loose. Now these lines are plenty strong enough to hold the weight of this power steering gearbox, so don't worry about it. Go ahead and lower your jack the rest of the way. Remove your pieces out of the way. At this point, you can see our shaft slid out on its own, thankfully. I'd sprayed some WD-40 on it ahead of time. It did help. If you find that your shaft won't come loose, you can take a screwdriver or a chisel, smack it in there with a hammer, and that'll help spread that apart and usually relax this enough. Go ahead and remove your jack. Get you a drain pan, slide it up underneath. Go ahead and remove your lines. And let all the fluid drain out, because you're not going to reuse any of it. Smells like fresh paint. Like to make sure the holes line up, everything looks the same. We're gonna grab our brand new power steering gearbox. Move the lines out of the way just a little bit. Now there is a flat spot inside here and on the gear shaft itself. Having the jack here kind of helps support the weight a little bit. Helps you line things up. Once you get the steering shaft slid back on, then you can jack up your jack a little bit just to put a little pressure on it and to raise it up to where you can get your lines back on. Make sure you start them with your fingers, otherwise you'll cross thread them. Very important. One thing I like to do is have all three of my bolts already inserted. Just barely at the edge. So when I get this raised up, since it's nice and heavy, we can get our bolt started. Once you get all three bolts started, you can go ahead and tighten them all up. It really doesn't make a difference what order. Now the gearbox is secured, we can move on to putting our fitment arm back on. We'll remove the supplied nut, remove the protective rubber cap. And I want to note that there are 4 wider grooves or wider splines that have to line up. And so to make it easier on myself, I'm going to go ahead and mark those. It's just for visualization, because once you get this up on here, it's a little more difficult to see where they're at. Raise it up to where it was. And I want to make sure that you can see what I'm talking about here. So you've got a bigger spline, smaller splines, and we have to line that up. So it just makes it a little easier to know where our marks are, so that we can line that straight up and put it back on the way it came off. We're within one groove. So we may have to go and turn the wheel just a little bit to get that lined up, but that's where you want it. Once you have it lined up, you should be able to wiggle it around, get it back on there. Now the new box does not come with a lock washer, so we're going to reuse the old one. We are going to use the new supplied nut. Use your 34 millimeter. Go ahead and tighten that up. Our last step underneath is to reinstall our 13mm bolt that holds on our steering shaft. So you'll want to turn your wheel so that lines up and then put your bolt back in. And if you're lucky, it already lines up because that's where it was when you took it off. Now we need to refill our power steering fluid. If you've got a funnel, great. If you don't, you can always make one. Fits pretty good. So we've added our fluid. The next thing I like to do is get the front wheels up off the ground, not very high, just off the pavement. And then I want to take the steering wheel and turn it all the way to the left and then back all the way to the right. What this does is promote fluid going all the way through the gearbox. We want to try and get as much air out of there as possible. You might hear a little gurgling. That's okay. Then I like to just let it sit. For a minute, see if any of the fluid level goes down, and then go ahead and top it back off. You may have to do this several times to get the level down and a lot of the air out of it. Rinse and repeat. Now that we've got most of the air out of the system, we're ready to go ahead and start the engine, and we'll do the same thing. I'm going to turn the steering wheel to the left, all the way to the right, back and forth a couple of times, being careful not to what they call deadhead, take it all the way to the end and just hold it there. You don't want to do that. Just take it there, bring it back. We'll do that several times, and then we'll shut the engine off. We'll check our fluid level and see if there's any air bubbles or any signs of air bubbles in the system. Right now it's clean and clear. Let me show you. We look down in there. There's no air bubbles. Everything looks nice and clean. That's what we're looking for, and that's what we want to see when we're done with the engine running. It feels really good, nice and easy to turn. Now we've done that, we'll come back over here. Just slightly crack it. Don't go all the way, make sure that there's no pressure. And you can go the rest of the way. Remove the lid. Look down in there. Crystal clear, no bubbles. Now we just need to get it off the jack stands, get our hood closed, and take it for a test drive. Now we'll button her up, take her for a test drive. So I just got back from test driving it. This is where the steering wheel is. This is perfectly straight. This is where it is now. So pretty close, not perfect. You could drive it like this if you want to. It still goes straight down the road. If you want the steering wheel aligned back up, you may have to take it to an alignment shop to take care of that. Checked for our leaks when we got back. No more leaks. Turns out we also got a performance upgrade. It's a lot easier to turn the steering wheel now than it was before. I wasn't expecting that. That's an A+ to A premium gearboxes. I'm really pleased with the performance overall of everything that I went through. The ease of installation. You could do it yourself in just a few minutes. Well, less than an hour. If you want one, link in the description.